Frank Klose, his mailbag is up every Tuesday at 973ESPN.com, and he joins me now as we are 3 hours away from the deadline. Frank, let's first get some thoughts on what they've done so far. Let's go back to Friday and get your insight and thoughts on Austin Hayes, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Christian Pache, two guys that I don't think had big plans in the Phillies season here. But Austin Hayes, is that enough for you, the move they make on Friday?
I don't know if it's enough. Is it a nice piece? Yes. I think they absolutely needed to address the outfield from the right-handed perspective, somebody that can hit left-handed pitchers. I mean, that was the Phillies' nemesis this year. They were not hitting against lefties, and we know that the splits on Brandon Marsh really show a deficiency there. So the Phillies had to do something, and bringing in Mays, who hit .328 against lefties coming into that trade, will hopefully fit the bill for them. And, you know, we said time and time again, the guy that Dave Dombrowski gets is not always the guy that we think he's going to get. And so he was kind of, when you went up and down the league thinking about who the Phillies could trade for, you were looking at the likes of the Detroit Tigers and the Los Angeles Angels looking for what outfielders might be available. And what do you know? They happened to find one from the major league roster of a really good team in the AL East.
Yeah, so Hayes is here. Obviously, though, I mean, you're getting a guy who's batting ninth for the most part here. You're right. I mean, I don't know what impact that brings to your team if you're going to hit him in the 9-hole. One question I have for you is, are you okay with Brandon Marsh hitting in the 5-hole? I mean, what does that say about your team? And this isn't to disparage Marsh, but he's been a guy that's generally hitting the back end of your lineup. Now he's hitting in a pretty prominent spot in the order, but only 60, 70% of the time. What do you make of what they're doing with Marsh and Hayes, where they're hitting them?
I don't know. I guess they're trying to get some momentum from Marsh's bat seeming to come alive in the last couple days. Marsh struggled for a real while. I mean, I was watching him in that Cleveland series, and he looked like he didn't have a clue at the plate, but he seems to have gotten his swing back. And I think they're trying to ride that. And also, JT Realmuto, he hasn't looked that great at the plate since coming off the IL. And, I was thinking, they skip the rehab assignments a lot with these Phillies players. And, it might have done somebody like Realmuto some good to get some at-bats. I mean, even if he wasn't ready to catch yet, he maybe could have played a few games at AAA as the designated hitter and worked on that timing. He doesn't seem to have it right now. So I think when you kind of look at all the parts, there's not a whole lot of options from the left side there that you can put up against a really good righty in Garrett Cole. And so it's kind of one of those situations where the guys you have are going to have to come through. And Brandon Marsh, he's looked really good at times this year. He's also not looked really good at times this year. So I think that momentum from, you saw him hit the ball a million miles an hour last night and a million miles. So maybe they're just trying to build off of that, what seems to be him getting his timing back.
Frank, we just had Keith Law on last hour. Don't know if you got a chance to hear any of what he said. I asked him about the return for Estevez. He didn't think the Phillies gave up too much. A lot of people were, talking about the return on that package. What do you make of Estevez, first off, the deal that they were able to make to get him?
Well, that's actually one of the mailbag questions. So I think it's one of those situations, and I've mentioned this on the air before. I remember being a kid and the Phillies trading away Juan Samuel and Nick Lava, the manager, saying, hey, you got to trade good guys to get good guys. And, I think George Klassen's a very promising pitching prospect. And, you're going to have to give some value to get value in return. And looking at the relievers on the market, certainly the Marlins and Scott maybe is probably the best arm getting moved, but this might have been 1A in Estevez. So if you're going to get a good guy for your bullpen like that, a back-end arm in the bullpen, someone that you can go to battle with and you feel like you're going to get the outs every time, you got to give up something good. And Klassen, he was somebody who the Phillies drafted kind of under the radar because he had some injuries and didn't pitch a lot in the later years of his college playing career. And so the Phillies nabbed him. He looked really, really good at Class A Clearwater, and in Low A, he made the opposition look silly every single time. Didn't have the same results when he went up to Jersey Shore and in high Class A, but he's showing a lot of promise. But that's the kind of player that the teams that are going to trade in Estevez are going to want back in return. And you just can't get everybody for free, right? So you got to give something to get something. And look at the Angels in one of the last couple trades the Phillies made. The Phillies gave up Logan O'Hoppe to get Marsh, and Logan O'Hoppe's showing all the signs that he's a major league starting catcher in the major leagues and a very good player. The Phillies got to the World Series in 2022 after making that deal, got far in the playoffs last year. So, you can't worry too much about what you've given up. Now, I did not hear Keith Law say that he didn't think it was a whole lot, but, I think Klassen in a lot of respects is a wild card with his injury history, but he throws the ball really hard. He made the lower levels look silly, but we'll see if that can translate in the upper levels of the minor leagues and maybe into the major league. Not everybody throws hard these days, right? It's a matter of making somebody into a pitcher. Klassen's looked really good this year, seemed to have come out of nowhere. Phillies seemed to hit on that draft pick, but at the end of the day, you want to win right now while you have the veterans that the Phillies have in their prime.
Estevez, in terms of his usage here, is he the closer for you? Is he the lockdown closer, or is he just another mix and matcher that they just try to find like they've been doing a lot here? Hey, we're going to use you in the 7th, and we're going to use you in the 8th because of the right hand. How do you see him being used?
Well, the Phillies actually seem to suggest that he's going to pitch the 9th inning pretty much every time. Now, you're not going to pitch every day because you need your days off. But in the playoff time, it sounds like they have him earmarked for the 9th inning, something you haven't really heard much from the Phillies in recent years under Rob Thompson. He's gone for the matchups. But, let's face it, the Phillies lefty Jose Alvarado, he struggled a little bit of late, but, getting those last few outs kind of been a tall task at times in recent days. And he's going to take the ball in the 9th and really helps the Phillies out because, you've got Jeff Hoffman, but that seemed to be about it, the one that was money in the bank. Now, Matt Strom from the left side's been pretty good, but you feel a lot better when all these other guys get backed up a little bit. So it seems like the Phillies are going to slot him in the 9th. Now, Rob Thompson did say if they're facing a few lefties in a row, they might treat that particular 9th inning a little bit differently, but it sounds like for the most part, he's going to be on the guy on the mound when you want to get those big outs.
Yeah, and the one question, look, you had to get another arm, no question about it. You know this, Frank. It's harder to get the last 3 outs in October than it is in Anaheim. We were looking at his last 15, 20 games. 7 of them were against Oakland, 7 of them against the Mariners, who good team, not a great offense. A lot of games where you're just not getting playoff atmospheres, but they had to get another closer. There's no question, or another closing type. There's not a question about it. Now, if they're going to use him as the guy, can he get those last 3 outs? That's going to be a big part.
Yeah, somebody brought this up on Twitter. I forget who it was. We were talking back and forth. Gregory Soto, when the Phillies traded for him, he was a 2-time All-Star closer in Detroit, but closing games for Detroit when essentially they're not expected to win, and he did close out a lot of games those couple of years, maybe 50 of them for the Tigers over a couple of years. The Tigers were never expected to make the playoffs. So, you saw him in those high leverage situations in Philly do not as well. So maybe there is something different mentally, but we'll have to find out just what his mindset is in a major market. And, LA is still a big market. They're up there in Anaheim, although they say they're Los Angeles, but
not nearly as much as attention.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you do want to see how he does with the lights on bright against some big teams, but you'll probably see him today or tomorrow against the Yankees. So he'll get a chance to probably help us understand where he fits in those high leverage situations right away.
Do they need another bullpen arm?
I think they could use one. So they have Junior Marte pitching. He's kind of the last man in the bullpen at this point. We've seen Junior Marte struggle a little bit now. If and when they get back the likes of Walker and then eventually Turnbull, figure that'll eat into the bullpen a little bit. But I wouldn't mind seeing them get another arm. I mean, you never have enough pitching in my estimation. So, if the deal's right, I wouldn't see him hesitate on getting some extra depth here because, with the injuries adding up, you don't want to burn out the ones that you have. I mean, earlier this year, you wouldn't have thought that Garrett Stubbs could pitch twice in such a short amount of time. Well, here it happened.
Here it happened. Yes, indeed. All right, Frank, let's, by the way, the Phillies lineup is out tonight. Let's take a look at that. It's brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage. Moving is a breeze with Clark's Moving and Storage. Let's take a look at the lineup they're going to throw tonight. At the Yankees, it's going to be Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm, Marsh, Real Muto, Castellanos, Stott, Hayes. It's the same lineup that they threw at them last night. Nola gets the start, so no real changes there. It goes back to that, you just traded for a guy to help your offense, and you're hitting him ninth in the lineup. So you wonder if Dave Dombrowski is still making calls between now and 6 to upgrade that offense.
I wouldn't be shocked, and for me too. Remember, they were struggling against left-handed pitching. And besides the slot on the roster that was Christian Pache that struggled, let's also not forget there's also the slot, Johan Rojas, who remains as I guess, their premium center field option. And also on the bench, Weston Wilson. Wilson's just been hitting 200, not necessarily been an upgrade over Whit Merrifield, whose roster spot he assumed. So because of them perhaps needing some more from the right side, because, Whit Merrifield could play the infield and the outfield, I wouldn't be totally shocked if the Phillies added another piece for the bench that could help them from the right side, because right now, if Hayes is your starter and Marsh is starting, your two righties on your bench are going to be Rojas and Wilson. So I think there is some room to improve there. I wouldn't be totally shocked if the Phillies added in that area.
All right, let's look at a couple of the mailbag questions with Frank here. Of course, the mailbag is over at 97.3ESPN.com. You get it every Tuesday here. Greg wants to know, over-under of trades. He's setting the line at 1.5. That seems like a lot between now and 6 o'clock tonight.
It does. I can see the Phillies making 2 trades for the reasons we just sort of started saying about that bench spot. I could see that being a very attainable piece that, we saw last year was Rodolfo Castro came in at the last minute. So, of course, they never got much value out of that one. But, they could add a bench bat, I think. And then also, I think right now it's a real concern that Ranger Suarez is hurting again. And you saw the nagging injuries to the likes of Zach Wheeler. Some extra starting pitching depth would be really, really helpful right now. I mean, certainly they've gotten a lot out of the South Jersey native from Bishop Eustace High School, right? But look at the other spot starts, the Kobe Allards, the Michael Mercados, right? The Phillies really have struggled, with their spot starters, and that pitching depth is getting kind of thin. So what I would say for the Phillies, if you can get some starting pitching depth, you don't need a top of the rotation starter. Now, as recently as yesterday, the Phillies were tied to Garrett Crochet of the Chicago White Sox, who in some respects kind of hurt his value on teams. He wasn't going to pitch in a postseason unless he got an extension. But, if you're the Phillies, you might be okay grabbing him and just sitting him on the shelf until next year after he gets you through this stretch. And it is that extra starter because, let's face it, the starters that the Phillies got in the last couple of years didn't pitch in the playoffs anyway. So I could see that there for depth and, just realizing that once you get past this deadline today, there are no more waiver trades. And when you don't have those waiver trades, then you can't add any further, right? So it's great that Phillips has stepped in and gave him a shot in the arm. Hopefully he continues to do that. But right now the Phillies have 2 rotation spots that were not supposed to be allotted to Phillips and now Allard, right? So I would be a little bit nervous about the starting pitching depth. So I would not be shocked if they get some sort of depth. May not be the front of the line starter. It might not be even someone who's going to stay on the major league roster that you could stash away at AAA. But the Phillies need to do something because they're walking a tightrope now, in my estimation.
Yeah, we were looking at some of the possibilities. You mentioned Garrett Crochet. It looks like Scooble's probably not going to be traded. But any of the 3 of the top guys, Miller, Crawford, Painter, is there any of the names that you've heard out there that you would be willing to part with one of those guys to get? Robert, Crochet, Scooble, etc. Mason Miller is being hurt, probably clouds that. Brett Rooker. Would you move any of those guys for any of the available names?
I would consider Crawford maybe. I think they would want to hang on to their top 2. I think the upside is so high for Miller right now from the offensive side that I think that they would want to hold on to him. He plays a premium position to have a bat like he has. So Miller, I would certainly be be careful to trade. And you never know what actual value will come with someone currently recovering from Tommy John surgery. So Andrew Painter, I don't think would be wise to trade, even if you were willing to trade him. His value might be down right now. So, but Crawford, I think, is the one big piece that they could possibly give if the right trade comes into their lap. And I don't know that they're shopping for the likes of Luis Robert or a Skubal. Phillies had been linked at one point, I think, to Jack Flaherty, but the starter at the Tigers, and then certainly the Phillies are used to doing trades with the Detroit Tigers. They've done a couple over the last couple of years. That could be a name, but it sounds like there's a lot of teams in on Flaherty, which just drives the price up. But yeah, I don't know that I would even trade Crawford for a Flaherty. I think if you're going to trade a Crawford, it needs to be for a more impact type piece, and I just don't know that there's one on the market right now that would warrant that. So I think for what the Phillies need, I don't think they necessarily need that blockbuster. I still have reservations about Robert because he hasn't really shown he was healthy, or he hasn't played like a premium player, although they want the premium return. So I don't know if I personally would be willing to make such a trade, but who knows? I mean, Dombrowski could decide he just wants to go for it. I mean, it's the last couple of years of Schwarber and Real Muto, and they're not getting any younger, so this could be the time to do it.
What about Mick Abel's value?
I don't think he's got a lot of value right now, unfortunately. I mean, yeah, he is one of their top pitching prospects, but he struggled at AAA. When you get up to AAA, you're facing a lot more polished hitters. The lower levels, it's very easy to strike out the undisciplined hitters out. But if you get up to AAA, you've got a lot of former major leaguers, and they're hitting them pretty hard this year. So I would not trade Abel just because I think that you'd be selling really low. So I would wait and see, if I'm the Phillies, how he does the rest of the way, what looks promising, see how he looks next year in spring training. And I don't think his value would necessarily improve if he pitches like this again next year. But I think for your investment in him, you want to get more out of it. You want to wait and see what he can do.
I got a question from Phil. He says, since when did the Mets start playing so well? Do the Phillies have anything to worry about? Well, the Mets are still in third place here behind Atlanta. I know they crept up a little bit there, but the Phillies have just been an average team for a while. Let's just throw the whole league in. Do the Phillies, are you watching a team and saying this team should be worried a little bit?
The Phillies have picked a good time to struggle. When you have a 10-game lead, it's probably the best time to play 2 games under 500 in the month of July, right? But I think you're dealing with a lot of guys trying to get healthy and then trying to get their feet under them. You have the All-Star break where some of the hitters lose their timing. You're seeing, some guys going, some guys coming. Now, I tend to think that the Phillies will still be okay in terms of their division lead, but it's almost like you can get a little lazy is not the right word, but you get a little complacent that when you have such a lead, they seem to really have to battle early on. But, I think they're far ahead enough to ward off the 2 teams, the Braves and the Mets in the East. But I think the real concern will be how are they going to play down the stretch? Because as you saw in 2022 when they went to the World Series, the hot team is the one that really gets to go far in that playoff. So hopefully here they can get this good reset at the deadline. They figure out who's going to be on the roster. Again, could be another tweak or 2 this afternoon. And then once you know who's on your team, then you got to start going for it. The Phillies are about to embark under that 10-game road trip. We talked about this months ago when the Phillies had a 750 winning percentage, right? This was the one I had on the calendar that's going to be really tough. So I think the Phillies are going to need to at least hang in there as they go to Seattle and to LA and to Arizona, because these are 3 tough series the Phillies are going to have on the road, on the West Coast. The West Coast trips always seem to get their timing off a little bit too. So, but even if they struggle over the next 10 days and today and tomorrow, I think the Phillies still have what it takes. When you have pitching this good, you're not likely to lose a lot of games, even if it's by accident, right? And they'll put up.
That stretch you just mentioned got a little more interesting with Josh Bell now going to Arizona. They added A.J. Puck, so they got another lefty. You've already struggled with their bullpen. Arizona, I think, is making some interesting moves. They're saying if we get matched up with Philadelphia, hey, we're going to go lefty bullpen help. We got Josh Bell, who's been a Philly killer. So I like some of the things they've done. We'll see what other teams do. By the way, Alex Cobb just got traded to the Guardians, not in the National League, but the Guardians are now saying, we're beefing up our pitching. So if you face the Guardians in the World Series, they've just added, I know Cobb's been hurt, but he should be back and ready to go. So teams are making their moves here. Have the Phillies done enough? We'll see if they end up doing something here, Frank. And obviously, Dave Dombrowski, we think he maybe has one more, but he seems, just listening to him, seems pretty content with this team right now.
Well, I think if you're the president of baseball operations, you don't want to go there and say, "Oh yeah, we've got 2 more holes. I don't think we can win if we get more pieces." Unless we get more pieces, right? You don't want to send that message to your team. You want to always like publicly say, like, "Oh yeah, we've got enough." Even if in the back of your head you're like texting or you turn around and you start texting all the other GMs, because let's face it, some deals are out there to be made, some deals are not out there to be made, and you always want to get better. And he's the type of guy that always tries to get better in many different ways. But, you don't want to send a message to the team that you have in front of you that they're not good enough. And so he's not going to do that.
All right, Frank. Intuition says they'll make another trade or no?
Yes.
All right.
I say 2. I don't think they'll be major. I bet you. I am going the over on that 1.5. I think 2.
All right. Well, we hope you're right, and we hope they're impactful moves, and we'll keep our eyes on that. Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. His Phillies mailbag is up, and you can hear him every Tuesday right here on the Sports Bash. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Mike.